"I am sorry, but could you please sit at one of the tables out in the backyard? My mother and I want the wedding backdrop to be perfect." That was what my future daughter-in-law said to me on my son's wedding day. "Hello everyone, my name is Celia. I am 60 years old. To be more exact, I am a widow. My husband passed away while serving his duty, leaving me to shoulder everything on my own and raise Lucas, my only son, from the time he was just learning how to speak until he became a grown man. And today is the day my son gets married. Yet on the most important day of his life, I was seen as an unwanted element in the picture. The words from my future daughter-in-law were delivered with such a gentle voice and such a polite smile that I could not even feel angry. Before we continue with the story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss out on more meaningful stories like this. And if you find that this story mirrors a part of your own life, please leave a comment. Just a few words of encouragement could mean a lot, not only for me, but for anyone silently enduring pain on their own. Sometimes a small act of kindness can warm an entire lonely heart. After hearing my future daughter-in-law's words, I froze. It took me a few seconds to fully process what had just happened. I had been politely removed from my rightful place at my own son's wedding, and yet strangely enough, I could not get angry. I did not cry. I did not even speak. All that came was a slow, awkward smile, the only reflex left after the shock. I did not even know who the smile was for. Was it for the bride, for Lucas, or for myself, for still believing that love alone could earn respect? I carefully stepped down the porch steps, trying to walk as normally as I could. Even though my heart was a tangled mess, I found a distant corner where few people would notice and sat down beside a blooming lavender bush. In my hand was an old worn-out purse, a gift Lucas gave me in his first year of college after receiving his very first scholarship. The music from the wedding stage played on sweet, grand, luxurious, but to me the sound felt like it came from a different world, distant, cold, and definitely not meant for me. Across that bright, sparkling scene were the sounds of laughter, warm wishes, flashing cameras, and glasses of red wine swirling under the lights. Meanwhile, I was sitting alone at an old chipped wooden table with a glass of cold water, untouched, unoffered. I looked down at my hands. I remembered the night when he had a high fever at 4 years old, and I carried him while running over 1 mile, about 16 kilometers, to the health station in the freezing rain. I remembered the day he got accepted into college, and I sold my wedding earrings just to buy him a computer. I remembered all the nights I spent cleaning, doing extra jobs, washing clothes for others, just so he would never have to wear second-hand clothes to school. I clearly remembered the time Lucas cried so hard at lunch in elementary school because other kids mocked him for wearing old clothes. That night, I stayed up sewing his shirt with the only spool of white thread I had left. I used to believe that if I loved my child enough, he would never let me feel left out. But I was wrong. Love, when seen as a duty, becomes a one-way ticket to being forgotten. The music shifted to a piano instrumental. The melody sounded like shards of glass breaking underfoot. I tried to smile, but the corners of my mouth would not move. A silent tear rolled down my hand, colder than the March wind. And today, just because I did not fit the wedding aesthetic, I was politely asked to step aside like a misplaced object that clashed with their perfect concept. I used to imagine that on this special day, I would sit in the front row, quietly watching my son say his vows. I thought somewhere in his speech he would mention me sincerely, as the person who raised him through every meal and every sleepless night. I used to think I mattered, but in their eyes I was nothing more than the person who footed the bill, just a wallet, a backup fund to make someone else's dreams sparkle, an unwanted part of the background they deliberately cropped out of their perfect frame. How did I have enough money to afford everything? We have to go back more than 20 years ago, when my husband was still alive. He was not a wealthy man, but he always believed that parents should be the foundation for their children's future. He used to remind me to save every little bit we could. He also left behind a few small plots of land. Back then, nobody cared about them. They were just empty fields and faraway lots with little value. But then urbanization came. Those pieces of land turned into white gold. Together with the savings he left, I was financially secure enough that I never had to depend on anyone. More importantly, I was able to give my son a proper wedding, complete and beautiful, without asking for anything in return. But what did I get in exchange? Not a single thank you, not a single word of acknowledgement, not even a seat worthy of the mother of the groom, just a makeshift seat outside, as if my presence tainted their perfect vision. I did not cry, but I felt cold, a deep, biting cold that seeped into my bones, not from the wind, but from the harsh truth. If I stayed silent, I would not just be forgotten, I would be erased. I set the glass of water down. The cold surface of the table numbed my fingertips, but somehow it woke me up. I pulled my phone out of my bag. My hands were still trembling slightly, but I knew I could not hesitate any longer. I dialed the first number, each digit feeling like it carved into my palm. The first call was to the hotel where Lucas and Olivia planned to spend their honeymoon. The room had been booked on my card. I was the one who suggested that destination to them because I once dreamed of going there with the man I loved, but they did not know that they had never asked. When the receptionist picked up, I spoke briefly and firmly. "Cancel the reservation. The account holder is me. I will cover the cancellation fee." No explanation, none needed. I moved on to email. My fingers typed each letter with solid conviction. I sent a message to the family lawyer. I request that the entire wedding fund be frozen and that all the money be transferred into the Single Mothers Scholarship Fund. Name Marigold my mother's favorite flower. I did not add anything else. But inside I knew the gift I had once prepared for my son would now go to young women fighting for the children they love. The last message went to the florist who was handling the Sunday brunch flowers. I simply wrote, "Cancel the entire order. No replacements needed. I apologize for the inconvenience." I pictured the florist's confused face. They would not understand why. But I understood all three actions took less than 5 minutes. But for me it felt like cutting through decades of silence. I lifted my head. Across the lawn, the sound of glasses clinking still rang brightly. The band was playing a classic jazz tune. Lucas was slow dancing with Olivia. Her mother wiped tears of joy from her eyes. And me. I was stepping out of their lives as if I had never existed. And I accepted that. But not with resignation. I accepted it with a clear, deliberate choice. I stood up. The chair creaked underneath me. I smoothed down my dress, tightened my grip on my handbag, and pulled my shawl up over my shoulders. The high heels I had bought 3 years ago, hoping to wear them at my son's wedding, were now making my feet ache. But I did not take them off. I walked across the soft grass, each step slow but steady. No one turned to look. No one called my name. But inside me, something had been restored. A name. A sense of dignity. A presence that did not need anyone's permission. For the first time in many years, I did not feel like I was stepping back. I was walking forward, and this time it was toward myself. I went home. I did not cry. I did not feel angry. I just felt empty. I opened the old wooden door, and everything inside seemed to sink into a void. There were no voices, no footsteps, no one waiting, no one calling my name. I could only hear the ticking of the clock, each beat hammering the fact that every moment I had once hoped for today would now never come to be. I set my handbag down on the floor and took off my shoes. My feet ached badly, but I did not complain. I walked into the living room. Everything was exactly as I had left it. The armchair where I used to sew the cream-colored curtains faded by the sun on one side. Only one thing was different, an empty space on the bookshelf. That was where the photo of me and Lucas on his graduation day used to sit. I had taken it down this morning. I did not know why. It was just a vague feeling, as if my heart had already sensed something was about to break. I sat down and turned on the computer. My fingers trembled slightly as they touched the keyboard. I had no intention of writing anything profound. I just needed to loosen the knot that had been tightening around my heart. I just needed to breathe somehow. I started typing, and the words slowly appeared on the laptop screen. I am not in the wedding photos, but I am the one who paved every step of the road that led them there. I wrote that sentence. I did not edit it. I did not rethink it. I hit post. I did not tag anyone. I did not mention any names, but anyone who understood would understand. I left the desk. I poured myself a glass of warm water. And when I came back, the computer screen was already flashing with the first notifications. Someone had shared the post. Someone else had left a comment. Strangers' names. Profile pictures of older women. Short but heavy lines of text. You have spoken for me. You put into words what I have carried in my heart for so long. I was made to sit at the very back row because my daughter-in-law said, "Your dress does not match the decor." 30 years raising my son, and yet he told me, "Please do not interfere, you will mess up the wedding program." I stayed silent, and I lost him that day. I read each comment one by one. Each sentence was like a mirror reflecting my own pain. A brutal truth began to take shape. There were hundreds, even thousands of women who had silently stepped out of the pictures they should have been at the center of. And the cruelest part was, they all believed it was their own private heartbreak until someone finally dared to speak it out loud. I received a private message from a woman named Rachel. She was 70 years old living in Wisconsin. She wrote, "Celia, I have no tears left, but my heart still clenched when I read your post. Thank you for doing what I never had the courage to do." I placed my hand over my heart. The heartbeat was steady, but beneath it was an earthquake. I used to think I was alone. I used to believe that if I was not welcome at my own son's wedding, it must have meant I had done something wrong. But as the messages kept flooding in, as the chillingly similar stories unfolded before my eyes, I realized I was not alone. And I realized this pain was never meant to be boxed away under something called acceptance. I did not write anything more. I did not need to explain. I did not need to clarify. But I began to understand that post was not a period at the end of my role in a family. It was an exclamation mark for a new chapter. A chapter where I would no longer give up my seat, no longer step back, no longer suppress my feelings, just to keep the peace for others. A few hours after my post began to spread widely, I received a message from Olivia. No flowery words, no apology, just one short line. "Why did you do that? I really do not understand." I looked at the text as if looking into a void filled with pretense, with politeness as thin as tissue paper. The daughter-in-law I had once opened my heart to, once imagined I would treat as my own daughter, now could not comprehend why someone treated as invisible would choose to stand up. It was not that Olivia was cruel, she was simply selfish in the softest way possible, always assuming someone else would silently sacrifice for her perfect world. I did not respond right away, and I did not feel upset. I set the phone down and made myself a pot of ginger tea. What I needed at that moment was space, not to be dragged into the chaos created by others. Lucas called several times. I saw his name flash across the screen. The name of the little boy who once fell asleep in my arms, now grown into a man who could remain silent in the face of his mother's pain. More messages poured in. "Mom, what is happening? I do not understand why you did this. Everyone is asking, and I do not know what to say." I did not reply. I sat on the old sofa, holding my cup of warm tea, and read each message as if reading the last words of a relationship that had faded beyond recognition. When the storm of emotions had calmed, I picked up my phone and typed a single line. No accusations, no lamenting, just a simple truth. "I once was the center of your world, but now you have built a world where there is no space for me." I sent it, and then I muted my phone. I did not do it to hurt them. I did not need them to cry to confess or to kneel for forgiveness. I just needed them to know I had seen enough. heard enough, and stayed silent long enough. My departure was not an outburst of anger. It was the result of thousands of tiny wounds left untended. If there was anything I wished for them to understand, it was this: a mother's presence should never be taken for granted, and love, when neglected long enough, will eventually choose to withdraw quietly, without fanfare, but permanently. 1 week later, I hosted a small dinner party in my backyard, a space that had once been overrun with weeds because I no longer had the heart to care for it. That evening, I arranged a few bouquets of white daisies, spread a soft yellow tablecloth I had kept from my nursing days, the one color that made me feel I could breathe. No glittering lights, no music blasting from a Bluetooth speaker, no fancy dresses, just 3 people, and an atmosphere where everyone felt genuinely welcomed. Sophie, the retired bookstore owner, who once slipped a novel into my coat pocket when she saw me wiping tears during a night shift. Ellie, my neighbor who lived alone and had fixed my leaking faucet 3 times without ever accepting payment, leaving only a note that read, "Just keep an eye on my basil plants in return." And Grace, the young woman with the perpetually messy hair, 2 little children, and eyes that always shimmered with gratitude. I helped pay her first semester's tuition, not because I was wealthy, but because I understood the feeling of scraping together every penny to hold on to your child's dream. We ate vegetable soup, toasted bread, and spaghetti. Simple food, not because we were saving money, but because I wanted to return to the basics: warmth. No one mentioned the wedding. No one asked why, but the way they looked at me, not with pity, not with curiosity, simply with silent understanding, told me they knew without needing words. I looked at each of them, not with the gaze of someone desperate to find a new community, but as someone who had finally realized some relationships do not begin with blood, nor are they bound by titles, and yet they save you when you are breaking apart. You do not need to be named to know you have loved. You just need to remember, if you built the whole house, do not sit out on the porch. I smiled, not the polite smile reserved for guests, not the forced smile to hold back tears, but a real smile for the first time in 2 weeks. Lucas sent me a long email. "Mum, I do not know why things turned out this way. Olivia did not mean any harm. Could you please talk to me?" I read it all, but I did not reply. I had learned not to answer things that no longer deserved an answer. I thought back years ago. You used to write me letters when you first left for college, rushed handwriting on school notebook paper, always beginning with, "Mom, I miss you so much." I once pressed each letter, carefully folding them like treasures, hiding them under my pillow, so that even in the middle of the night I could feel a little closer to you. Now, reading the words, "Olivia did not mean any harm," I wondered, what does that mean? If it was not intentional, does that make it right? Can someone smile while pushing another out of the most important moment of their life and still call that no ill will? I sent a message back to my son. "You once were the reason I dared to push through the darkest years. I once believed that if I loved enough, I would be loved in return. But love is not a seed that grows on its own. If the one who receives it never waters it, it will wither quietly and without a sound. You know, the most painful part is not being pushed aside. It is when people believe they have the right to do it, thinking a mother will always forgive, always endure, always wait. But not this time. I did not stay silent to punish you. I stayed silent because I am learning to protect what remains of my dignity. The dignity of someone who was once the center of a child's world, now just a faint blur on the edge of a wedding invitation. If you truly want to talk, then start by listening. Not listening to argue, not listening to defend someone else, but listening to understand. I have not disappeared. I have simply stepped out of a role you and the person beside you wrote for me without ever asking if I still wanted to play it. After sending the message, I turned off my phone and returned to my room. I began tidying up, not just cleaning, but reclaiming my space, my emotions, and the peace I had spent years giving away to avoid being a burden to make others comfortable. Thinking that love had to come with endless sacrifice, I hung a new painting on the wall. Not a family photo, not an old memory, just an abstract piece I chose from a small local shop. Swirls of blue patches of earthy yellow, and a single bright red streak slicing across, like a scar across a still lake. I did not know its meaning, but I saw myself in it, a part gentle, a part broken, and a part learning to blaze, even if just once. I sorted through my wardrobe. The old clothes I had kept just in case. I packed them neatly into a box, ready to donate. I kept only what made me feel light. A soft brown scarf, a cozy cardigan, a pair of warm slippers. Small things but chosen for myself. For the first time in a long while, I lit a scented candle. The scent of lavender drifted gently through the air, not overwhelming, not forceful, just a quiet presence, the way I wished to exist. Not loud, not needing attention, but impossible to ignore. I signed up for an art class. There no one knew. I had once been a nurse, had once raised a top-of-his-class son, had once cooked every meal, and washed every handkerchief for a family, now only existing in memory. There I was, not a mother, not a widow, not the lady, asked to sit out back. I was Celia, a woman learning to let colors speak her heart. I started reading old books again, pages yellowed, covers frayed from being clutched through countless sleepless nights. But this time I read not to escape reality, but to remember I once had a rich inner world, and it was still there, just buried under the noise of unconditional sacrifice. I did not try to forget what had happened. I did not deny the hurt, but I chose not to let it keep hurting me. I chose to move forward, not carrying resentment, but with a heart that now knew how to set boundaries. Forgiveness does not mean acceptance. Forgiveness is when you no longer need an apology, because you have already healed. I read that from an old card. Small letters, almost a whisper, but it rang through me like a bell. Not everyone is strong enough to apologize, and not everyone needs an apology to keep living. True healing does not come from others. It comes from the moment you look into the mirror and see yourself whole again, even after breaking. Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. If you see yourself somewhere in my story, please remember you are not alone. So many others are walking this journey too. Before we finish, please leave a comment below with a positive affirmation, a small promise to yourself to attract good things. For example, I deserve to be loved fully at any age, or whatever words your heart needs to hear right now. And do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, so you will not miss any more deep, heartfelt stories like this one. Let us build a safe, warm space together, a place where every older soul feels heard, understood, and empowered to live the brightest years of their lives. See you in the next videos, and thank you from the bottom of my heart.